Unitarian story. This is for everyone who's ever felt misjudged or misunderstood. Look at the size of that ship, said Billy. It's as high as a 23-story building, said Father. It has everything in it, said Mother, even a shopping mall and 5 swimming pools, said Betty. Walter, the farting dog, was excited. Welcome aboard, said the cruise director. What a nice dog, said the pet officer Smedley. The ship pulled away from the dock. The horn sounded. Walter farted. All our animal friends stayed down here in the pet palace, said the pet officer. We do our best to make them completely comfortable. Walter sniffed around the fancy room. I'm off for my first round of golf, said Father. I'm off for my massage, said Mother. We're off to swim in 5 pools, said Billy. Don't worry, Walter, added Betty. We'll be back in a little while. Walter settled down on a plush cushion. Not bad, he said to himself, and he farted. As soon as the door of the pet palace closed, trouble started brewing. Dogs began growling, cats began hissing, birds began squawking. Why? Walter was farting. Get the stinker out of here, said the parrot in the corner. Pet officer Smedley returned with some pet treats and was instantly enveloped in a fart cloud. This smell is like an emergency to me, he said, and opened all the vents. On the golf course, Father was lining up to putt when he noticed a familiar smell. What's that horrible odor? Said one of the other golfers. Must be the sea air, said the father. But Father knew it wasn't the sea air. He saw the pet officer Smedley coming toward him. We got a problem with that dog of yours. Father, Mother, Betty, Billy were led back to the pet palace. Fart alert, squawked the parrot. We're going to have to put Walter in quarantine, said Smedley. Oh no, said Walter. Lower the lifeboats. Lower the lifeboats, squawked the parrot. Women and parrots first. They decided to put Walter in the room where they stored the stinky cheese. Don't worry, Walter, said Billy. We won't be far away. We'll visit you a whole lot, said Betty. And then she closed the door. Fair enough, thought Walter, quietly farting. Among the stinky cheeses, there was a big one that called to Walter. I shouldn't eat that, thought Walter. It doesn't belong to me. Yet here we are together, me and the cheese. Perhaps if I just lick it lightly, no one would notice. He licked it lightly and then ate the entire cheese. Even though Walter was tucked away deep in the belly of the ship, his farts crept out under the door, slithered down the hallway, and made it upstairs. And by the next day, 6 dining rooms were filled with farts and angry passengers in the ship, and the ship stinks. We want our money back. Please be patient, ladies and gentlemen, said the cruise director. We're having a little problem with ventilation system, but we'll have it under control in a few minutes. The captain said, put the dog overboard. Walter was lowered into a lifeboat, which he was tied to the back of the ship. This will be fun, Walter said to Billy. Officer Smedley promised that he would bring me treats every day. Fair enough, said Walter, farting. That night, the huge block of cheese inside him began doing its work and plugging up all the parts. The passengers were enjoying themselves again, and Walter trailed behind the lonely lifeboat. The gas is building badly, he said, but at least I'm still attached to the ship. Suddenly, the computer system that controlled everything on the ship crashed, and the backup system crashed right behind it, and the power died. The engines quit, and the ship drifted helplessly everybody grew hot and cranky. In his lifeboat, Walter was having his own problems. The gas beans were unbearable. Try not to think about it, he said. Twisting to look at his tail, he realized that if the cheese lets go, I'll be blown halfway to the Arctic Circle. He felt gas, bubbling and building and building. He dug in with his paws and braced himself. If anything breaks my perfect concentration, I'm done for. A fly landed on his nose. He looked at the fly. The fly looked at him. There was a deep rumble as the cheese shifted inside him. A few small farts came out, gently pushed the lifeboat up against the ship. That wasn't so bad, said Walter, but then all the farts had been blocked for days, came out in one roar as a rocket. The ship heaved forward. Walter hung on, still farting. Warp speed, squawked the parrot in the pet palace. We must be back at the full power, said Father, gripping the deck rail, but it was much more full power. It was spark power. It shot the ship over the horizon into the port, right on time, said the captain. When the cruise was over, the pet officer Smedley presented Walter with the sailor hat. It was an honor having Walter on our cruise. He had a great time, but it's good to be back on land, said Mother. Anyone for pizza? Asked the father. Hold the cheese, squawked the parrot. That's it. The title of the talk or the sermon today is closing Pandora's box. And when I knew that I was going to be presenting today, I was hearing some things too in the past by all commentators on television, radio, had been starting to talk about this Pandora box, that what was going on today, with the different things we've experienced over the last 2 years, was like opening the Pandora's box. And so I thought, well, let's take a look at it. Well, I will let you know right now, I started to take a look at it and I thought maybe it was going to be simple, and it was not simple. There's a lot in Pandora's box. So, but the story of Pandora's box is a Greek mythology. Pandora was the daughter of Zeus. And as a wedding present, Zeus gave his daughter Pandora's box and said, all right, do not open it under any circumstances. Well, Pandora was quite inquisitive. And she just finally, after weeks, months, she just couldn't wait anymore. And she opened the box. And as the mythology of the story goes, horrible things flew out of the box, including greed, envy, hatred, pain, disease, hunger, poverty, war, and death. And it sounds familiar. And all life's misery had been let out into the world. Pandora slammed the lid of the box back down. The last thing, as the story goes, remaining inside the box was hope. Ever since, humans have been able to hold on to this hope in order to survive the witness of Pandora's, what she had let out. Today, Pandora's box refers to means anything that's best untouched, or fear of what might come up. I have heard this before. I've heard it in offices. I was at a college. I heard that too, type of thing. Well, Pandora's box. You just don't dare open it because a lot of things are going to happen. And sometimes they do. One example that I would like to share with you, and going back into history, is the fact of the opening of a Pandora's box was the Red Scare, which was actually started and caused by one individual, McCarthy, a senator in the 50s. Well, it started in about 1947. And he got going in the 50s there. In fact, about a 10-year reign of terror he did. And he started off by, creating the fear that there were communists in the State Department. In reality, at the end, there was not. They did not find one communist in the State Department. But what happened was that people were accused. And just by being accused or mentioned, or maybe you went to a meeting, you were held accountable. The terrible thing about it was that people, there was the blacklist that was in Hollywood, and many of the actors and actresses were accused and unfound. There was no foundation for this. And in fact, some of them escaped to Europe, so they were able to, continue with their life and their career. But and the Red Scare also, of course, communism at that time, and there were different things that were happening. There were, certain things with rockets and ships and that type of thing in different places. And I also know, of course, you get in 52, the YouTube incident that we shot down. It was our spy plane. And, those things like that just added to it. And then with him doing this, it fed more and more. And it became a culture and a devastating one. During the 10 years in the Senate, McCarthy and his staff gained notoriety for making outlandish accusations that thought initially directed to government employees would later include Americans from all walks of life, because they systematically engaged in practice of public accusations of political disloyalty, of subversion, with little regard for evidence and the use of unfair investigatory methods. Senator McCarthy would later himself be accused of victimizing those who appeared before his committee and suppressing the basic civil rights and liberties. In result, first, the result was he ruined the reputation and the lives of many people without credible evidence. Second, he accused accusation of communist sympathies to counterattack anyone, if this sounds familiar, that criticized him. And third, he argued against freedom of speech because much of his rhetoric assumed that any discussion of that idea underlying communism was dangerous and un-American. There was the subcommittee on the investigation of the House and Un-American Activities Committee, which was the format and the tool where they accused and attempted to prosecute a lot of people. But again, just the word of it. Now, I can say that I had kind of a personal thing with it. I started out of college, and my first teaching job was in a small town about 60 miles east from here at Early, Iowa. And I was teaching government and also American history. I will tell you that I actually held back even going into communism and started even talking about it, because there was that fear. Not that I would be accused of it, but you didn't know who would be maybe offended or whatever would happen. So I feel that it takes us into today a little bit. I will tell you, I had instructions from my wife. She's not here today. That's easy. She can she told me that when I come and start giving this presentation today, not mention one word. And the word is Trump. Because she says, you don't know who you will offend. You don't know who you will, and then, it brings out the same thing that I experienced back in. But I will say, so it was kind of funny. She says, well, just say past administration. So, I happened to run across a book last night. In fact, it was came out in the UU journal. I just got it yesterday in the magazine. And maybe you've heard of it. It just came out. It's called All Is Not Lost by Alex Smadlin. And he talks about disasters. But what he talks about, because I want to leave today on a positive note, we can talk about, and let's face it, we've all gone through the last 4 years, at different levels. We've had, well, it's enough said with that. But he claims that disasters are opportunities. They're all over. We've got rising sea levels. We've got prolonged periods of drought, wildfires, COVID-19 killing millions and infecting millions globally. We had the rise of the far-right nationalists and promoted by Donald Trump. Conspiracies like QAnon and demonized Democrats. The deep state to subvert the Trump administration. Happening with George Floyd, that was killed by a police officer. So what he's saying that out of this, there can be positive things. And I know, for example, when I think back, I like to use the one about women suffrage. That was for the women at that time, I had great admiration for them. When you read about them, they were put in jail, prison, they, went on starvation, diets, they definitely discriminated against simply to have the right to vote. And to me, that brings up today. Fine, wonderful, you had the power of the woman to vote. What's happening today, my God, it's like we're going backwards. We're talking about now with the question of women to have right over their own bodies. So, these things are there. Maybe Pandora's box is still around. Too bad. So I say that this disaster, using an example, changed the world, especially in America for women. But one thing that presidents, I'm sorry, there's one thing I forgot. I'd like to, in regards to Trump, the one thing that he points out is that the president turned, the administration into a slot machine to enrich himself and his family. And he's threatened the faith in the democratic institutions. So, but I think we can come out of this. I know things I've been reading. One of my favorite authors, David McCullough, and he talks about, how we do come out. And first of all, he says no history. Because, people say history repeats itself. Not exactly, there's certain points and characteristics maybe, but not. But you can learn from that and you see what people have gone through and how they've overcome. And the other thing, as he says, is to read. And the other thing is to do good. In other words, help out neighbors and do something good for the country. That was some of his points for you could say a little brighter future. One of my one thing about Americans, they desperately need stability, and I would agree with that. You know, a lot of it, I don't feel, a lot of these things today, I don't feel real stable about it. Sometimes I won't listen to the news for a while, and I watch I like movies about love stories, you know, and kind of take a break. But one of my favorite movies is The President with Michael Douglas and Michael J. Fox. There is a scene in which they were talking about leadership, and Michael J. Fox was saying to the president that people are so hungry for leadership that they'll go through the desert and see a mirage, and when they get there, they'll eat the sand. Michael looks at it and said, no, they'll go through the mirage. They won't eat the sand. They eat the sand because they don't know the difference. And I think that's true, they don't. So without leadership, you end up having maybe different little thoughts and people that we know with some weird ideas. Another book that I really liked was Why People Do Weird Things. And the people that, I heard somebody say something about superstition. Nothing, Amber's not here, it's not against you, nothing about that. The thing is, the superstition, usually more superstition done by people that have, in the study, lower IQs. That also, when they figure the demographics during what happened to us in the last 4 years, is that most of the people voting and supporting even now the past administration are white and not college graduates, and that's the demographics. Nothing bad anyway, but you know that's kind of what it is. We have a little time here. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Does anyone have any questions?